enlisted in 1941, 10/21/41.
Wow.
And I didn't know it when I joined the Coast Guard at that time. I didn't realize that the Coast Guard had been taken over by the Navy on the 1st of July 1941. We were no longer under the Treasury Department, but we were under the Navy Department.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that. So I was in the Navy. The only difference between us and the Navy was that shield on my sleeve of my uniform.
You were living where when you signed up? What town were you living in?
I was living in Cass Lake.
Okay.
I'd been there for 2 years.
And where was your induction at?
I got on the train in St. Paul on 11:30 on the night of the 20th, and there were 4 other guys with me. We went to Omaha, and we were sworn in Omaha. There was a Coast Guard office in Omaha. I think it was the district office at the time, and we were sworn in there. And then we proceeded on to the west coast to Port Townsend, Washington, for boot camp. And we got to boot camp on the 23rd of October, and I left boot camp about the 20th of November. Didn't get much time there, and went down to Treasure Island and boarded the USS Castor.
What kind of ship was that?
It was a 300-foot Navy supply ship.
Okay.
And we were on board that for 3 days or 4 or 5 days while they loaded, until they loaded it finally with all kinds of munitions to take out to the Pacific. And when we left San Francisco on the 27th of October, or November rather, 27th of November we left there, and I got seasick. Immediately we hit the ground swells off of San Francisco, but they put me in the galley anyway, and I worked in the galley for the whole passage. And we had to take a southern route because we ran into a typhoon. So my first go at being out to sea, I got seasick, and we ran into a typhoon, and I didn't get seasick anymore. The rougher it got, the better I felt. And on the morning of December the 4th at 6 o'clock, the lookout shouted "Land ho!" and all of us, of course, piled up on deck. We could see a cloud. That's all we saw was a cloud, but that was the cloud over probably Mount Haleakala or one of the other large mountains there.
Oh, this is what country? Where was the land at?
At Honolulu.
Okay.
We pulled off of Pearl Harbor, and we had to wait until 10 o'clock to get in until the submarine nets were opened for us. The submarine nets were in operation. And we pulled into the harbor and went over to what was called Sail 19, and docked this big ship there, and then they started unloading it right away. We had shells that the Navy didn't use. We had 7-inch and 13-inch shells, and they were only used by the British Navy. So you can see that with Lend-Lease or something was in vogue at that time. And we had a field day for 2 days. We didn't do a damn thing but just sit on that big ship and sun ourselves while the rest of the crew was working unloading. We were in transit. There were 25 of us Coast Guardsmen on that ship. And finally, the captain got sick at feeding us, I guess. So he shipped us all over to the Navy receiving ship, which was just a big building. I couldn't even find it when I went back there in 1986. But we got shipped over there, and they were full. There were a lot of people in transit at that time. And they took and put the 25 of us on the 3rd floor of the building in the hallway. The hallways were huge. We got army cots, and we were bunked there. And then at noon, we were sitting there, and the officer of the day came along and said, "Why don't you guys get a 48-hour pass and get the heck out of here, because there's nothing going on the weekend in Pearl Harbor. Everybody's home on, everybody's on shore.
And what year was that?
That was 1941.
Okay.
And so 5 or 6 of us put together all the money we had. I think we had about $3. And we got on the Navy bus and went into Honolulu. That was the last time I saw Honolulu with the lights on, because I left there in 1943, and the blackout was in. Well, the blackout stayed until the first of January 1944. So from that point on, Honolulu was blacked out.
So you were there before the attack?
I got there on December the 4th. I was on leave on December the 6th, downtown Honolulu. We had a great time. We we came back on the late bus and got back to the Navy Yard at 2 o'clock. Went up and got into our nice Army cots and settled in to go to sleep all day on Saturday or Sunday. And Sunday morning at 6 o'clock, the OD came around and he said, "I need a work detail." And so all of us said, "Well, we're on Liberty, we're on pass." He said, "You might be, but you're here, and I need a work detail." so the 5 of us got selected. you, and we had to go down and have breakfast at the mess hall there. And then they took us. No, we walked. We had to walk down to the recreation center where they had a big party the night before. This was a building about a half a mile down from the receiving ship, right on the shores of the harbor.
And this is all before the attack?
Oh yeah, this is all about 6:30, quarter to 7 in the morning. And we got down to the rec hall probably 7:30, and of course we were all bitching because we didn't want to go clean up the mess hall in the beginning and the rec hall in the beginning, but we had to do it anyway. So all 5 of us were dispersed throughout the recreational center down there, getting ready to clean, when the loudspeaker came on and said, "Attack, attack, this is not a drill." They've been having drills up to that point in time. And I ran out to the side of the recreation center, and a plane with a great big rising sun on the back of it went right by me. A torpedo bomber heading for the harbor. And I went out in front of the building, and every torpedo bomber that hit the harbor came right over my head.
Wow.
And for the first attack, which lasted until 8:55, I was a spectator. What do? I had a broom. And so the 5 of us stayed where we were, because the loudspeaker, the PA system was on, and they told everybody, "Stay where you are. Don't try to run down into the harbor and help anybody, because you'll probably mess things up worse than what's going on down there." So we watched the Oklahoma turn over and the Arizona blow up, and little gigs running around in the harbor picking people up, and we were half a mile up just looking down on the whole scene. And when the all clear blew at 8:55, then we immediately went back to the receiving ship to see what could we do. I got assigned to the sick bay, and that's where I labored for the rest of the attack. And the second attack started at 9 o'clock again, and they were bringing the people into sick bay all covered with oil. And I remember I started out just putting them in the shower and washing them off so they could go back and get treated. And that whole afternoon is the one great big fog. But it was just about dusk, pretty close to dusk, when I got sent back to my unit. When we got back there, and here comes the armory people. They passed out 30 caliber 303s, they call them, old Springfields. We each got a Springfield and 2 bandoliers of ammunition. And it was dark by this time. And they said, the rumor was that the Japs had landed, and everything was up in the air. The harbor was burning, the ships were blowing up, it was still bad. The attacks had all quit after the second one, thank goodness. They didn't do the third attack, which they had planned. And we were treated to a real fireworks display about 9:30 that night. 4 of our own airplanes had gone out looking for the Japanese fleet, and they were coming back, and they didn't have the password. The whole harbor opened up. You've never seen pyrotechnics like that. We shot down 2 of our own planes. So we watched that. And then the next morning, details were being assigned again. 6 or 8 of my buddies got a detail to go up to the burial at what is now the cemetery. It was called Red Hill at that time. And all they did was dig a trench and throw the bodies in. They just took the name tags off of them, And they were on that detail. What did I get stuck on? The kitchen detail. And so for the next 2 days, from 5 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night, we washed dishes. The chow line started outside of the receiving ship at 6 o'clock in the morning, and it didn't quit till 8 o'clock at night. It was 4 deep, and it never stopped. We had 1 dishwasher, 1 steam dishwasher. And us 6 Coast Guardsmen, we kept up with the dishes, by God, for 2 days. Finally, on the 3rd day, the Coast Guard remembered where we were and came and got us. But the Navy guys that took over from us, they were old hands at this thing. And they didn't give a good goddamn if those dishes were done or not. And when we left, we looked down at the area where they were working, and they had dishes piled up all over the place. We managed to stay ahead of the job, being a young, eager, and dumb. So we went down to downtown Honolulu to Pier 4. Pier 4. By the way, I lost my sea bag. I didn't have a sea bag anymore. All I had was the clothes on my back. So we went down to Pier 4, which is Pier 9, 8, 9, 9, and 10 was where the Aloha Tower was. And that's where all of the big cruise ships used to come in. You get the big welcome at Aloha Tower. And Pier 4 was seaward from the Aloha Tower and was the last pier before you got to the ocean. And we get down to Pier 4, and they had no idea what to do with this. Pier 4 was just simply a pier with Coast Guard ships that had been pulled in, tied up to it. And there was Pier 5, which was a derelict pier kind of, and it was just sitting there, and a ship had pulled in there to dock. And there was no place for cooking, no galley, probably about 2 bathrooms, and not a place at all for people to sleep. And here we got 25 of us show up there, and all of the members who were stationed at the pier, who went home every night and slept, were all called back to be on base. And we had that massive number of people on that bloody pier. You can imagine what it was like.
Sleep any place you can.
I wound up with my Army cot sleeping in the machine shop. And of course we had to stand watches. We had a watch on the end of the pier, we had a watch on the gate, 2 guys in each place. We had 2 machine gun nests put up on the overhead of our buildings there, and of course I drew the overhead watch. That was a very dangerous place to be because everybody was trigger happy. Every ventilator in town, I think, had holes in it. It was ventilated to swing in the wind. That's the only air conditioning I had in those buildings at that time. And you'd hear all the shooting start, and you'd hear the ping, ping, ping as they go through these ventilators. So that was what we did for the next, well, until I got transferred out of there around the 14th or 15th of January. I got sent over to Maui on extended duty for outpost. The Japanese had shelled Wailuku and Kahului, and they were afraid they were going to send ashore raiding parties and things like this and saboteurs. And so they established outposts on all the islands, and the Coast Guard was in charge of all the outposts. And we got sent to Maui to an old lighthouse station. Well, it wasn't old, it was a lighthouse station, but it was, with the advent of Pearl Harbor, it got closed down. And that's where I spent the next 2.5 months, which was nice getting away from downtown Honolulu, believe me. But that was my introduction to the World War II.
And then after the 2 months, where'd you go next?
Oh, after the, that was great duty, by the way.
I can imagine.
No officers around. The highest ranking officer we had there was a first class signalman. A signalman is the guy that gets up on the ship,
Right.
and works the little things and all that kind of good stuff. And he had an appropriate name. His name was Samuel O. Story, S-O-S. Signalman with that kind of a name, it fit him perfectly. He was a nice guy, and we got orders from Honolulu at that time to send 1 man back to Honolulu because we had 6 and we should have only had 5. So the man in charge didn't want to say, "You got to go." So we drew straws. I drew the short straw. So I went back to Honolulu, back to that damn mess back there. But by this time, they had put up quartermaster tents on the seaward side of our dock there. And so I was put into a quartermaster corps tent with 7 other guys. And we stood captain of the port watches then. That's where you go out and stand guard on every ship every ship in the harbor had a guard on it. And it was monotonous. The morning guard started out at from 7 to noon, and then you came back and you had till 6 o'clock at night, and then you went on watch from 6 to midnight. And then every week they dogged the watch so that you went on from midnight to 6, and then and it was damn monotonous, but necessary because they were trying to protect the ships in the harbor and the people on them and all this sort of thing. And I was there from, I guess it was May when I got back there. April, May, June. First part of June, I was once again told I was going to be in a nice group of people for training. And we were shipped to a base halfway out to Diamond Head. If you're familiar with it, Diamond Head is out on the point out here. And we got shipped out to this base. The base was an old estate, and they had built two bunkhouses on it, dormitories, and they had a nice tennis court, and it had beautiful grounds. We were going to spend the time there being in commando training. And so for the next 3 months, June, July, and August, we were under the direction of 5 Marine sergeants and a Marine lieutenant. The lieutenant's name was Lieutenant Berg, and one of the sergeants' names was, God, what the heck was his name? There were 5 of them anyway, and they were mean bastards. Oh, they knew how to put you through the. You've seen these movies about commando training camps.
Yeah,
Well, that's what it was. And in the 3 months we were there, they whipped us into pretty good shape.
You were 3 months in commando training?
Yeah, and nobody knew where we were supposed to go. And all of a sudden, at the end of August, first part of September, we were disbanded, just like that. Just like that. Was sent back to the captain of the port. Well, we were in fight shape by that time, and going back to the captain of the port, that was terrible, because we'd gotten used to, the different kind of lifestyle. So back we go to the captain of the port, and there were 50 of us that were in that commando group. And then about 3 weeks later, we got the news that that group of 50 were going to go over to Hilo, Hawaii, and we man the port detail over there. We were going to take care of the Hilo harbor. So we went over there. This heavily trained group went over there, where there was hardly anything to be protecting, just the occasional ship that came into the Hilo harbor, the Hilo, Hawaii. Well, that was very good duty, and I did the unthinkable thing. We were all assembled out in front. Every morning we assembled, and they'd take roll. That got to be pretty old, and then we'd do the work of the day and go down to the harbor when our trick was up, And so we were all assembled out there one morning, and the OD said, "The office would like to know if anyone out here can type." And I was so sick and tired of standing every morning getting out and general quarters out there, so I said, "Me, I can type." You're never supposed to do that, because they'll give you a wheelbarrow someplace.
Yeah.
But by golly, it was true. They wanted somebody that could type, and I had learned typing in high school. So I walked into the office, and I spent the next couple of weeks typing logs. Every base has a log. Every ship has a log. Every base has a log, and it's the same mundane stuff that you put in every day practically, but they got to keep it. And my big job for the first 2 weeks was typing logs, and I excelled at that. So then the commanding officer, he said, "Well, I'm looking for 3 people to staff the code room. Would you like to do that?" He actually asked me if I'd like to do that. I said, "Certainly." And so he took 3 of us. One was a yeoman, and the other 2 of us were called yeoman strikers. We were going to try to get our yeoman rating. And our job was to staff this code room for 24 hours. We'd work 8 hours and then have 12 off, and the other guy would work 8. And so the 3 of us would just be continuous. It was good duty. It was good duty. And I learned a lot about encryption and decryption and that sort of thing. And I worked in there for, well, let me see, that would be in November. I worked there in November, from November until I left Hilo in the following May. What we had to do was, when the ship came into the harbor, then we had to route them to get them to the next port of call. And we had to send and receive messages on teletype, those old teletype things we had. We had to learn the codes, how to receive and send in code and so on.
You mean Morse code?
No, this was the codes where you have the A means F, and that kind of stuff. There were strip ciphers, and they had all kinds of different codes. And while I was there, I managed to get to be a yeoman second class. So my pay went up to about $100 a month from 52. So that was great. After my stint at Hilo, which I enjoyed immensely and enjoyed the people over there and went to real luau's, and I got shipped back to Honolulu again.
Back and forth, back and forth.
And when I got back this time, though, I went on sea duty. I went aboard the Coast Guard cutter Reliance. And since I was now a yeoman, I became the only scribe they had aboard that ship. I had a little cubby hole down in the galley with wire all around it, so that nobody else could get into my sanctuary, and I was the yeoman. And personnel and everything else that came up. I did that for, let's see, May, June, July, September. And in November, my 2 years was up in the islands, and I could apply for reassignment to the mainland. And so I did. And by God, they said, good, you've got your 24 months in, you can go back to the mainland. So on just about the exact date I left San Francisco, I left Pearl Harbor to go back to San Francisco. It took 7 days to crossing again, and I got to San Francisco just about the time I got to Pearl Harbor in the beginning. So I've spent my 2 years, that was my first 2 years in the service.
How long was it tour of duty for Coast Guard? 3, 4 years?
4.
4 years.
In the middle of it, in the middle of the whole thing, when I was back in the States, my enlistment came up and I had to re-enlist.
Why'd you have to re-enlist?
Well, they weren't going to let me go.
Oh.
So it was kind of one of those things where you do it, you know.
Yeah.
So I re-enlisted for the duration. Now remember, I'm a regular Coast Guard man. I'm not a reserve. My Coast Guard number, I remember to this day because
I can't remember mine.
Because you got paid by it.
Oh.
Here's my Coast Guard number here.
Okay.
That was my dog tag.
Hold on, let me get the.
Can you see it?
Yep, see.
That's my dog tag.
Stands out pretty good.
I got that issued at Pier 4 when I was there. The time on the Coast Guard cutter Reliance was interesting. Most of our duty was convoy duty, convoying the ships in and around the Hawaiian Islands. We did go part way, I think it was to Midway one time, and bought a ship, picked up a ship on the way back. But for 2 weeks one time we were experimenting with the Navy on a new type of submarine detection equipment, and they would bring this. The Navy would bring this equipment over to our little ship under guard in the morning and take it down in our bilge, and then we'd go out with a submarine. We were the mothership for the submarine. We'd go out to the appointed area where the submarines could submerge, and we'd play tag with the submarine. The boys would use this new sonar gear or whatever they called it to see if they could spot the submarine, and we'd drop the yellow dye and they'd let up the air, you know, this kind of stuff. Well, while we were doing this, one happy day in early November, we got 2 submarines on the sonar, and that caused a little pandemonium aboard our ship. The Navy guys were, it can't be 2 submarines down there, but there were. And so this was a restricted area, and it was so we called up our submarine and sent it back home. He could go from there to the harbor without our escort. So we sent him home, but the other submarine persisted, you know. And we reported it to Commander Hawaiian Sea Frontier, and I don't think they believed us. So finally, after about 2 hours of tracking this damn thing, we finally got permission from the Commander Hawaiian Sea Frontier to depth charge. We had to have permission because this was in a restricted area. So we got permission finally because the Navy lieutenant who was in charge of the sonar finally got disgusted and came up and took over, broke all regulations and broadcast live and told them, damn it, we've got a foreign object which we think is an enemy submarine, and you guys have got to give us permission to depth charge. So they finally did, and so we went on, we started into depth charge. You would have appreciated this. Our top speed was 10 or 11 knots. It said right on the depth charge rack, do not drop under 15 knots.
Okay, now you dropped depth charges.
Yeah, we made our run and dropped the depth charges, and I think the back of our little 125 footer came up out of the water quite considerable. It sounded like giants were hammering on the hull of our.
Well, the drum said you must do 15 knots or more, or it'll be too close.
15 knots before you can drop the depth charges, and
you were doing 10.
we were doing 10. So we didn't know what was going to happen, but it all turned out just fine. And after the initial run, the enemy submarine, which we assumed it was now, sent up that usual debris that you see come up.
Yeah.
And we made another run and dropped some more depth charges, but we had a limited number of depth charges on our little ship. In the meantime, the Navy had sent word to the other ships that were doing ping line duty out by the submarine nets to come over and see what this Coast Guard ship was doing over there. And so they were just leisurely coming along, and all of a sudden, there were a couple of old four stackers. The Ellen was one of them.
What's a four stacker?
Those are old World War I destroyers.
Oh, okay.
The four stackers. You tell them by that, and they poured on the coal, and so we retreated from the field of battle and let them take over. And my God, they had depth charges flying through the air all over the place, but they didn't get the sub. He got away clean, but what he was doing was sitting off of Pearl Harbor monitoring the traffic in and out of the harbor, you see. That was what we did over in Japan too. So. But anyway, after that incident, that's shortly before I put in for my transfer back to the States, and so around Thanksgiving I got my transfer and I went over to Pearl Harbor, and I got transported back to the States on a captured Italian liner, a 30,000-ton beauty.
Who captured it?
It was one of those that was in port when we declared war. It was an Italian liner, and so
Okay.
we just confiscated it and put it into use for us. I can't remember the name of the thing, but it was a beautiful 30,000-tonner. And after going out to sea on a 125-footer, that was like a church, you know. Yet people got seasick on that thing pretty bad, especially the air boys going home. So I was on that for 7 days, going back to San Francisco, and so I got 10 days leave of absence and 6 days travel time, and so I got back home for the first time in 2 years, and then I went back out to Frisco and got assigned to the district office out there. The yeomen were in demand at that time. And then I got duty with the Navy again for a while. I got sent from the district office down to San Luis Obispo, the Monterey section, and I was on a crash boat detail. I was the yeoman on the crash boat detail with the Navy, Coast Guard again with the Navy, and I was there for. Well, I was only assigned to that while I was awaiting reassignment from San Francisco. So I was only there for about 6 weeks. And finally my reassignment came in, and I was sent up to the Naval District in Seattle. And I got assigned to the Coast Guard base at the mouth of the Columbia River, Ilwaco Coast Guard base, which was a big base at the mouth of the Columbia there with all that traffic in the Columbia River and everything. That was a busy base. And then I got reassigned about 6 weeks later to Westport, Washington. Another lighthouse. Used to be a life-saving base. And I was there for a year, and then the war ended. Just when my term came up for 18 months to go back overseas. I could have kissed Harry Truman's foot for dropping the atomic bomb, believe me. And since they didn't have any use for a yeoman at a base like that, I got shipped to the Coast Guard District Office. I was there for several months, and finally in May of the next of 1946, since I was in the regular Coast Guard and I had signed up for the duration, I didn't get discharged at the end of the war. So I worked in the district office up there, and I was in recruiting for a while, and then I got shipped down to Miami, Florida, because they were short yeomen down there, and that was a big discharge area. So I got to Miami in May of '46, and I wound up at Coral Gables Air Base, which was good duty, except my office was above one of those aerodrome closet things, you know. Yeah. When it was 120 outside, it was 220 inside.
Oh, geez.
But I stayed there until September, and then my rating got unfroze. And the day it was unfroze, my application for discharge was in the works. And so I left there in the first part of October on 77 days terminal leave. And I had a good time for 77 days. Then I went back to St. Louis, Missouri, and got discharged in St. Louis on the 10th day of December 1946. Started school 3 months later. That's my Coast Guard history. This is an honor flight, and they have been going now for, I believe, the last 3 years, and they get sponsored by different people, as I understand it. Now, the flight I went on was sponsored by the Vietnam veterans, and they did a tremendous job, and they I don't know how many years they've been sponsoring flights, but they have another one coming up this October, and they have 2 scheduled for next year. And the gentleman in charge of our flight said they're going to keep taking World War II veterans as long as they can get enough to fill the airplane.
How'd they find you?
Well, apparently they had some kind of a registration, which I wasn't even aware of, but my kids found out about it, and they signed me up.
Okay.
Over in Grand Forks, I think it was, where they signed me up. And it percolated down, and finally I got accepted. And then each one of us had to have a sponsor or a guardian, and the guardians each paid $500 for their fare, and they came along with you, of course, naturally, to help you on anything. And they had wheelchairs, and every bus had at least 25 to 30 wheelchairs stowed under it for people to use. And when we left the airport here, they had refreshments and so on. We left here at was early in the morning, and we got to the D.C. airport. We went Sun Country aircraft, and when we got to D.C., they had a ceremony there where the plane gets sprayed with water. Apparently that's a tradition. I knew nothing about it. And then when we got off there, we had a receiving line, a whole bunch of people there to greet us, and everybody in uniform, and the Rolling Thunder, the Harley Davidson group.
Oh, no kidding.
Were there.
That's a big group.
And I got one of the little things that kind of like $1 they give out with
Yep.
Rolling Thunder
Medallion,
on it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, seen that, nice.
And
Huh.
I talked to the one guy, and he said that the whole group goes and visits the Veterans Hospital
In Washington?
Yeah,
In
every month.
Now, the Rolling Thunders come from all over the country?
Yeah, I don't know whether they do there, but
Okay.
the local group there does that. And then we got on board the buses. We had 3 buses, and the group was divided into red, white, and blue, and your buses were marked for you.
Okay.
And then when you got someplace to get off and go to a memorial, each bus was divided into like platoons.
Okay.
The red bus would have 3 or 4 platoons, and you'd get off and on, and you had a leader in each platoon to make sure we got everybody back on the bus before you left. And we went over the whole. We got a good tour of the National Cemetery, and we were very, very much interested in, of course, President Kennedy's grave, and Audie Murphy's. Audie
Yeah.
Murphy is
Yeah.
a Medal of Honor winner, and he's the only Medal of Honor winner whose grave is in the cemetery
Well,
there.
I think, wasn't he the most decorated soldier?
Most decorated soldier of all time, and all Medal of Honor winners get their tombstones engraved in gold. He said no.
Hmm.
I missed a dog
Is there a
face.
marker on the tube saying,
Oh yeah.
showing the Medal of Honor?
Oh yeah.
Okay,
But-
that's
but
good then.
But there's no gold.
No, but there's a marker that shows
Oh, yeah.
that. Now,
But he-
how much time did you spend there? 1 day, 2 days?
We spent. We went over in the morning and back at night.
Wow.
So we had a real abbreviated visit to everything we went to. We spent about 45 minutes in Arlington.
So what time did you get home at night?
It was about 11:30 when we got
Wow, that's a long day then.
We left at, we had to be there at 5:30 in the morning. And then we,
At the Bemidji airport?
no, at the Minneapolis airport.
Oh,
I went down there and stayed at my daughter's place, and we got up at 3 o'clock to get to the airport on time.
holy
And,
cow.
Then my kids all met at me at the airport when we got back. We had this big receiving line at the airport. The people are up there at 11:30 waiting for
Yeah.
us. I mean, it was just.
Wow.
They had,
People from the Minneapolis area.
Yeah, Minneapolis area. We had people from the services, all in uniform. We had one man with 4 stripes on his sleeve. He must have been a brigadier or some damn thing in the army. They were there shaking hands and cheering. And it was quite a welcome.
Wow. I knew about the flights, but I didn't know that.
They were called honor flights,
Well,
and there were a couple of people on there from the Vietnam, from the Korean War, but nobody from Vietnam was on our flight.
Yeah.
Of course, a lot of guys that served in World War II served in the Korean War.
Well, I know a person who did that.
Yeah,
I just talked to him. It was John, and he got out.
we got a lot of veterans in here, by the way. Have you got Harold Ugelsted's name down?
I have to look at the sheet and I'll let you know.
Harold Ugelstead, he was a captain in the infantry.
Oh, okay.
And he went in after the Battle of the Bulge, and went with his group all the way to the Elbe, and
Wow.
saw a lot of fighting.
I'll check the list.
Wasn't a dry eye in the place.